We were going to do something for the main channel, looking at this game in detail, doing analysis was our plan before the game took place. And then it happened, and I think this is one of the most difficult to break down and analyse games I can recall in time doing this channel. Certainly the games we've intended to break down and analyse.
Yeah.
Because this felt a little bit, I mean, there's a few angles to this. One is like, the game felt like a professional team playing a semi-pro team.
Yeah.
Right? And so you had, physically, Wales were unable to get going forward. Physically, Wales were unable to cross the gain line. They were dominated. Scrum, you had moments that line up. Wales had a couple of mauls that went well. You had a few bits that individually worked. Aaron Wainwright had a really good game before he got gouged by Tame Plumtree in the less noted gouge of the game. And you had odd things for Wales that went well individually. I thought Rhys Davies had a good game, as we talked about in the preview. But broadly, this was a game of them just being completely outmuscled and out physicality'd, and not in the way we talked about the other week with the Ireland game, where that was a top-tier team being out-physicaled in a way you could break down on a rugby field and go, okay, this is how it impacted the play. Here, Wales were unable to live with what South Africa were doing to them.
It was, when you say it's hard to analyse, it's hard to say anything that is unique or insightful or, interesting about this. Because,
yeah, exactly.
Because it felt like, my impression was watching the game, it felt like a misbooked fixture that somebody had accidentally brought along their senior academy to play against somebody's development, random club's development academy of players who've barely played much rugby before.
When I was a kid playing in the worst team in the NLD League, the Nottingham Lincolnshire Derbyshire League, and Freddie Tuolangi turned up thinking we're the Nottingham Rugby Academy, and he then just blitzed us on fitness because he was like, none of you up to standard, none of you anywhere near where you need to be. And there's a little bit of if he then organises a game rather than just doing a training session. It was a bit, Wales just didn't look in the same league.
No.
And there's a thing that a number of times, when, since starting this channel back, almost 8 years ago now, people have been like, oh, can you analyse, my amateur team, my school team, my whatever? And I was like, I can't, because the way in which I would know to break this down, because I'm not a coach, right? And you obviously, do coach. I'm not, right? The way in which I'd look at rugby, you need a level of parity, and it's how can two teams that are evenly matched get one over another?
Yes.
Is the thing that I'm interested in and look at.
Yeah.
And I think most games, or a lot of games at amateur levels and at lower levels, are often won by the team who is more physical, more dominant, has bigger players, faster players, more able players, or is better coached and better put together, right?
Yeah. Again, it's similar to international rugby, but you say that's relative, It's the way if I were to analyse a game that I'd played in or that I'd coached, I would not approach it in the same way as I do international levels. I don't look at it and go oh yeah, this person's not quick enough to play in the wing at international level, because it's not international level.
It felt like a massive drop off from normal international level.
It didn't feel like international rugby.
It didn't even feel like the Wales team. The Wales team that turned up against New Zealand was there and was good. Yeah. But this South Africa team that's monstered New Zealand, monstered Ireland, monstered France even this year, and England are the only team who are they haven't basically taken to this year. That's because they haven't played them. We've
maybe been the worst people for giving Wales the benefit of the doubt during the losing streak and going oh no, but they gave it a good effort. And a lot of people say no, they were shit. And it's there's so many games where you can say no, but they tried. Not they tried. It sounds patronising, but it's they gave it a go, and there were moments where they were in the game, blah blah blah. There was never that moment.
There were games during that Gatland run where they physically did everything they had to get into the game, as we're saying, but they were badly coached and they weren't able to.
And they weren't good enough.
Yeah. And so we could then talk about it on that level. Here, it felt like kind of the opposite, and it's tricky to talk about, and this is why we've kind of been avoiding. We haven't really known how to cover this game. I think it's just going to be a discussion.
We had similar with Ireland v Portugal with the 100 points in the summer.
Where you just go, this is just a mismatch, and there's kind of nothing you can say. So we can break down and we can look at, Sasha takes his quick tap try brilliantly. Well done to him.
Yeah.
The Springboks walk all over, the game becomes quite simple once, if you have good patterns, good shape, good drills, and you are going forward on the gain line all the time. Yeah. And South Africa were on almost every single carry.
Yeah, you've got Andre Esterhuizen you can give it to if in doubt. Not that they ever were in doubt at any point.
Yeah.
The main thing, it sounds like we're kind of being avoidant of talking about Wales being shit and South Africa being brilliant. But the thing is, we can't avoid either of those two things because they are both so true.
I think there's four things to talk about. I think one is South Africa being really good.
Yeah.
And I think that second half, they were very clinical. The first half, Wales gave them a bit of a fight, even though they were out-muscled. And then that kind of like crumbled once they got to 30-odd points. South Africa, I think we've sort of covered, and we've sort of covered in past weeks as well.
I want to also just say, like, weirdly, I think the most impressive thing for South Africa was the discipline.
Yeah.
That they didn't give away any dumb penalties that would give Wales that chance to get... in the first 78 minutes,
Yes.
they didn't give away any dumb penalties that give Wales the chance to kick to the corner and get into the game. Because we said that Wales have been this autumn good in the 22. And the thing is, I think back to this game, and I kind of question my hypothesis of like, are they not? But the fact is, we don't know.
Yeah.
Because South Africa didn't give them the chance to find out if that's still the case against them.
Kicked really well. It took them 18 seconds to hang a ball on Blair Murray. And they regathered it. They really smartly also identified that, like, because everyone's been so focused on the fact that Blair Murray is so bad on the high ball, they keep missing the fact that even though Dan Ed's is good at catching the high ball, he's really short.
Yeah.
Or like compared to Kane and Moody, compared to Ethan Hooker, he's significantly shorter.
Damian Willemse,
so they were hanging high bombs on Dan Ed's as well. They weren't just going out, and they avoided the two wingers, who, as we mentioned, like probably two of the better aerial wingers Wales have. Ellis Mee dropped one ball cold, which was really, hard on him. Like, he had a pretty solid game otherwise, but had a difficult moment. But
again, it's a big ask for him, isn't it? There's a lot of players who are new to this.
South Africa's kicking game, really good, kept them going forward. Wales's kicking game had odd moments of gaining momentum, but it never gained them enough that they could then follow up the following phase. You look at the New Zealand game, and they could get to width, and South Africa's defence sets faster and sets better.
Yeah.
And we saw, I think, that Wales are, over this autumn, they're getting close to, or getting closer at least, to competing with teams below South Africa. Like, I can see them competing with New Zealand inside 5 years. I can see them competing with Ireland or, Scotland, Argentina, etc. inside a few years. Possibly even inside a year, they can put together one or two performances like that.
Sure. On the basis of the All Blacks game, why not?
Yeah, like, they can be giving teams a game inside a year. South Africa, you question. You question whether that's going to happen without major change of players. And obviously, Wales were missing an awful lot of players. There are players coming in who haven't played rugby in a long time, were undercooked as well. You look at a bunch of that type 5 that came in, like, just haven't played a game in 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So, like, Gareth Thomas has played, like, 20 minutes last week and then has to scrummage against Wilco Lowe. And Rhys Davies hasn't played in, like, 4 or 5 weeks. Ben Carter hasn't played in 4 or 5 weeks.
Obviously, people will bring up so did South Africa. South Africa have these players.
Yeah.
Wales are still trying to find their first 15,
and
let alone their bench or
have rotated all those players in. Wales haven't been able to afford
because South Africa are a better team.
Because South Africa have got depth. Yeah. And they can afford to. They're further along in the development. Wales aren't. So, for Wales, I think, if we're to pick out any positives at all, because I think it's easy to be negative about that.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say, England in the Six Nations, Australia last year, I felt watching those two games, which the other two games have been huge blowouts in ways we weren't quite expecting beyond what we anticipated. I felt watching them like this isn't the end, like this is going to be, like we're in the middle of something and this isn't rock bottom yet.
Yeah.
This I was watching, I was like, no, actually, we're already on the way back up. And it was a temporary, like we were already climbing back up and like the vehicle kind of dipped a little bit.
Yeah.
Like we tried to stretch ourselves too far too fast.
There's two ways of viewing it, isn't it? Because also you could say, does that kill the momentum of playing away? What's the point of playing well against the All Blacks if the next week you're going to lose 73-0?
I think club coaches have to manage a few of these players really, really smartly.
Yeah.
Like, you probably want to put a lot of the young players, especially the likes of Dan Edwards, who are, kind of, you want them thinking about the game. You want to put them into a game straight away, and you want them thinking about a new game and them not reflecting on that game for very long. You want them straight into a new environment, going, okay, you're playing Connacht on Sunday, go out there and give it a lash, and then we'll rest you. Dewi Lake's on holiday right now, which is good. He deserves that. Good man. Like, absolutely, he should be. Wales have to be really smart on how they manage them.
Yeah.
In terms of positive, like, I think the one positive was I thought Rhys Davies played really well. Had one maul he really disrupted, really got in there, was physical, made a couple of big shots. Like, for 50-odd minutes, I thought he was very good. And then obviously, beyond that,
there's an international player in there.
Up. I looked at him, I went, there's a player who can be playing international rugby to a good standard in there. Otherwise, the Welsh players who I was like, yeah, they had a pretty good game, were established names, like, Aaron Wainwright and Dewi Lake. I thought both had good games. And you're kind of like, well, we know those are Wales' two best players who are available for this game.
Yeah.
So we knew that. But yeah, any positives for you from a Welsh point of view?
No, I think I agree with everything you've just said and no more. Because 73-0 loss at home. Like, we don't have to pick out anything more than that.
Yeah. Okay. There is one other thing about Wales. There's two big controversies at this game.
Yeah.
One of them has transcended the world of rugby, and we'll touch on that in a minute. The other, I think, has been very localised storm in the teacup within Welsh rugby, but it goes back generations. So in 2004?
Yeah, 2004.
Wales lost to Italy for the first time in the Six Nations ever. And at full time, the camera cut over to Colin Jarvis, who was then the Welsh captain, and he was on the bench smiling. Like, he was smiling. It was a grimace of like, oh God, what's just happened?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, we've all done it. We've all like, or, you know, certainly I know I do it.
I'm doing it now.
Yeah, like things are bleak, so you kind of like laugh because otherwise you'd cry.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And he's clearly doing that, but the camera cuts to him as he's smiling.
Yeah.
And the following Monday morning, there was a poll ran and published in the Western Mail, you know, Welsh newspaper, of the most unpopular men in Wales. Number 1 was Osama bin Laden. Number 2 was Saddam Hussein. Number 3 was Colin Jarvis. On the basis of that picture. So, you then fast forward to last year, Warren Gatland smiling after the Australia game, pissed a lot of people off. But I think really we got the Colin Jarvis moment for a new generation on Saturday, as Wales conceded the try, Wales didn't score a try, as they conceded the try to make it their record loss at home ever. They cut up to Dave Reddin, the W's director of performance, and he was in the box looking genuinely like he was having a lovely time.
He was grinning.
Yeah.
It wasn't a smile, like a cheeky wry smile of, oh God, this is diabolical, what we're going to do, how we're going to survive this one. He was just like chatting to his mates in the corporate box and just sharing drinks or food or whatever and just having a good old time.
Yeah. David Buttress, you know, obviously head of the Dragons, came out and said, like, I know in that situation, he's been in the situation many times, he's watched the Dragons lose plenty of times.
Yeah.
He's like, I could never, even as a high up, even in those corporate boxes, I couldn't be smiling. Like, I couldn't be doing that. I know if I was in that position, I couldn't be there.
And
I'd be locked into the game.
Critically, David Buttress is not a performance director.
No.
He's an investor, you know, who cares about the team.
Yeah, exactly, and has been a Dragons fan like long. But there's already been a lot of kind of backlash to Dave Reddin because he just doesn't sound like he cares, right? And everything going to Welsh Rugby means an awful lot to a lot of people, and I count myself amongst them.
Yeah, Steve Tandy most definitely one of them, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely, which is something that's really like reassuring and pleasing about Tandy and that whole regime. Is like, I really feel like he cares. I really feel like that meant something to him.
I like him.
In a way that I didn't with Gatland over the last two big losses.
Yeah.
Dave Reddin grinning and smiling and having a lovely time also comes one day after it was unveiled that the WU is now spending 35% more on pay for their high-ups, including Reddin himself. So no wonder he's having a lovely time. No wonder Richard Collier-Keywood said that he loves going into work every single day and he enjoys his job so much. That is happening despite the fact they're currently looking to cut a region. There's talk of Y11, who are the owners of the Ospreys, potentially taking over Cardiff, potentially putting a bid in. All this is rumour and speculation. As I understand it, very few people know anything, you know, concrete, and whether or not that bid is chosen, we don't know yet. That's a whole other topic of discussion. That would mean the closure of a club. Dave Reddin then said before the game as well that because they won't be able to sort the URC licence places, they'll be needing to enter a semi-pro Super Rugby Cymru team into the URC for a season or 2 seasons, whilst they're in the process of cutting a club, whilst they're renegotiating this deal. So that's all bullshit. And then there he is, having a lovely time. And I don't know, man. It felt like Nero giggles while Rome burns. Like, I was genuinely very angry seeing it. And this following morning, I was putting toast in the toaster, and I remembered about it, and I felt furious.
Yeah.
I was just kind of like, this guy doesn't give a shit. And you listen to him on Good Bad Rugby. Again, I read the transcript, you know, I wasn't going to, but again, he was just a bit like, I just didn't know Welsh Rugby was like this at all, and doesn't seem to care, like, very much was like, are you going to stay long term? He's like, probably not, but like, if he cuts a club, that will impact the fans, players, etc. involved in that club every weekend for the rest of their lives.
Yeah,
for him, it will
people lose
impact
their
him for
jobs
like a
over
year
it
before he
and
leaves
so
it.
on.
Exactly.
And the thing is, if they're making that decision because it frees up the budget to do something else, which is for the benefit of the WRU or Welsh Rugby, then you get it. Even if you disagree with that, then fine. But when it's just so more money can go into his own pocket, suddenly you start to get suspicious.
It's always been the argument, right? And I get it, that they do need to improve pathways. They do need to devote more funding to the women's game, especially because that's only going to start bringing in more and more money.
Certainly.
They do need to fund the regions better, right? And I've always said too much money is going to the high ups, and it's always been the case. Too much money was going to the community clubs, and I think they have addressed that a bit over the last few years, and a lot of the money come from that. There was always, they mentioned, Abby Tierney gave the flowers example. They were spending an absurd number of
50 grand on flowers a year.
Yeah. And that's a player's contract, right? That they could be reducing and putting that in. So there's always been so much more of that. Like, you look at the last administration who took, 20 members of their extended family on a safari vacation at a 5-star hotel in South Africa almost in 2022. And you've got those examples have always been going on. And you have few of those now, but are they cutting back on it? Especially when we see it comes a day after 35% increase in spending on.
That's significant.
Which is that's big. Yeah. That's big. I don't know. I know I'm not being the most articulate I've ever been on this, but it pissed me off, and I know I'm not alone in that. And Dave Reddin has continuously, since coming in, and I think there's Josh on Blood and Mud made a very good point that is he just almost like the English devil being put in front of the media and fans to be blame this guy, so that the Richie Colley Keywers of the world behind the scenes
maybe
can
there's a degree of that,
but also he's in a very responsible job.
Yeah.
And is he the right person for the job? When he came in, I was very willing to give him a chance because he's got a strong CV, right?
Yes.
And then the more I hear him talk, the more I go, this guy does not know his beans.
What we want as Welsh fans, above winning, is people who were doing their absolute best.
Yeah.
You look at, the person who summed up Welsh rugby for the last couple of years is Jack Morgan on the pitch. Is somebody who has given absolutely out every ounce of himself. You can say the same with Dewi Lake, of Aaron Wainwright, of so many of these guys that, that we've talked a lot about and praised. Even, the likes of Harry Deeves last week, Alex Mann, people who've come in. And are they the best international players in the world? Nowhere near. But are they giving everything they can because they're passionate about winning games for Wales or trying to win games for us? Absolutely. Steve Tandy, 100% I get that from. And if we lose, and I'm saying this as a Welsh fan now rather than as an impartial rugby person, if we lose every game in the Six Nations, and I can clearly see that Tandy is doing everything he can, and I can't think of somebody who opaquely would do a better job of that, who would increase this performance better than him, then that's fine. I will stand by Steve Tandy and just say to him, good luck. That's all I want from you, is that you're trying to make us better, and nobody else will do that, definitely. I don't get that from Dave Reddin.
No.
Look, there's every chance that the 5 seconds of him smiling are taken out of context, whatever that means. But it is at the very least a bad look, isn't it?
It very much is. It comes back to something about the whole Dave Reddin administration, which is that it is all built entirely around the national team winning, right? And I think you touched on something there, which is that Wales have had, really over their history, 4 periods of winning consistently. The 1900s, the 50s, the 70s, and then
2010s.
The 2010s, the late noughties and 2010s. And that's it. The West of Welsh rugby has been built on punching above their weight and on fighting hard and on being really nuggety and committed and working harder than everyone else. And there's been a few periods where that attitude and that spirit has come good and seen them winning games consistently, right? And I think that has to stand, it has to remain at the absolute core of what Welsh rugby is. And it has to be a representative of communities and villages and of people who love and care about the game. And I kind of don't, obviously I want Wales to win more games than they lose. I want Wales to win every game they play.
Yeah, same.
But I'm a little bit, if Wales winning comes at the cost of Welsh rugby losing its soul, I think they lose much more than the
I know what you mean.
Win.
Then why do we support them?
Exactly. And I kind of think it comes at the cost of people caring.
Right? Yeah.
Of you probably, if you
want to be proud to be Welsh, don't you, when you watch them play? The same of any nation.
Reddin's preference was to go down to 2 teams who are new brands, new everything, set up in professional environments where they both train in the same centre. And at that point, right, basically the national team is split in half for a domestic season, right? And you lose the core of Welsh rugby, which is tribalism, and which is fighting incredibly hard for your community, for your gang, for your whatever, your kind of, your nugget of the world. And beyond that, the fact that rugby is, if you break it down, it can be, yes, it's a physicality-based game. That's something South Africa have done incredibly well. It's also an effort-based game.
Yep.
And that's something the Welsh have always kind of really like encapsulated. It's always been like at the core of Welsh rugby.
Definitely.
Is effort and is passion and is like giving everything. And I think in taking away regions, in taking away pathways up to there, in the fact that he said before this game when he was interviewed by Craig Doyle and Dan Bigger on TNT Sports, he said the reason they're looking to cut the Wales, kind of teams, only have one side in the West, is because of the number of schools that they can use properly. So what they want to do clearly is replicate the Leinster model, right?
Yeah.
So they've gone, okay, there's more private schools in East Wales than there is in West Wales. They're ignoring the fact that you go back through generations, right? Like, there are 4 or 5 schools in Carmarthenshire, in the Swansea Valleys, that have consistently produced a Welsh international every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Like, they just continue to do this and have done this for like 30, 40, 100 in some case years. And that has always been the case. And just because they're not posh schools that you can invest in and develop kind of Leinster-style system where you have them running professional pathways and so on from that age, because they're not, fee-paying schools, again, it's a very English rugby outlook on Welsh rugby.
It is. It really
and I think
is.
you've kind of got to look at this like, no, like there are some schools that have really good coaching and really good pathways in place and really good links to the professional clubs that just, but serve a working class area because Wales is a working class game in Wales. And I think there's something what Dave Reddin wants to do in this is take Welsh rugby away from its working class roots and try and imbue it with the sort of thing that like Irish rugby and English rugby have used, which is very much leaning into a more, privately educated background.
Yeah, because as you say, it's a working class sport in Wales, more so than it is in England or Ireland or wherever. And that's not a bad thing, it's just a different thing.
Yeah.
And you look at like the 2019 team, arguably the greatest Wales team ever. I believe the only 2 players who were privately educated in Wales were George North and Alwyn Jones.
Yes, they were, yeah.
And everybody else, obviously there were a lot of players who grew up
there were a few players
in
from
England or whatever.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it was people who grew up playing rugby in state schools in Wales. You look at the Bro Merthin School in Carmarthenshire.
Yeah.
Just endless Wales internationals, like Ken Owens, Rhys Priestland, Ryan Elias, all went there. Like the endless numbers of them. And
it's every 3 or 4 years they produce international.
Yeah, and there are various schools around Wales that are like that, and it's like that's what you need to be leaning into is those areas, not necessarily just those schools, but those areas, because clearly they're doing something right and they have done historically.
Yeah, that's a lot of very deep Welsh rugby chat. I know, I realise. We could go on. I could easily go on for an hour about this, and I probably will at some point. But yeah, I just feel like, look, a lot of Dave Reddin's proposals take Welsh rugby away from what it is, and I think threaten to do a lot of very long-term harm, even if they improve the national team in a medium term. In like 5 years' time, maybe they're better than they would be, but like in 30 years' time, I think a lot of the things he's looking to do will have a knock-on impact that leads to people just not watching and not caring about rugby in Wales.
I sadly don't disagree.
Yeah, but there we go. The other option is I don't think it's possible Dave Reddin's gone inside a year. So we'll see. Watch this space. He'll probably be smiling about it. He'll probably get a big payout and he'll be delighted by that. 35% bigger than his predecessor.
That's way more important than Wales doing well.
So there was one other incident, and we should look. It's one of these tricky things, right? That we don't talk about referee decisions.
No. And we're not going to talk about the referee decision.
A red card was given. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that for Eben Etzebeth, who gouged Alex Mann. That's as simple as you can put it.
The thing is, we've just done a load of talking about how angry we are about our sports team not playing well at this funny little kids game.
Yeah.
And this is a part of why it's taken us so long to put this video together.
We haven't known how to address, because the 2 talking points of the game were really Dave Reddin and Eben Etzebeth, rather than any of the actual rugby. And it was pretty hard to look at the rugby and find something interesting to say.
That's it, because I think this puts the rugby in perspective.
Yeah.
What we saw at the end of that game wasn't, that's not a thing that you see on a rugby pitch, I think this might be the worst incident I've seen on a rugby pitch before.
I still think Callum Clark deliberately breaking Rob Hawkins' arm is
fair.
By some way there.
Yeah. But regardless...
I think it's very bad. I'm not going to say it's the worst I've seen.
It's right up there, regardless. And...
I watched the 87 World Cup.
Sure. But... I don't know, man. It makes it really difficult to justify getting angry about stuff like, oh yeah, player on our team couldn't catch ball. First thing I want to say is, before we get into this, Eben Etzebeth is one of the greatest rugby players of all time. And he is and should and probably will go down as probably top 3 rugby players ever. Potentially, I've said before on record that I have him on par with Richie McCaw as the greatest forward of all time.
Yeah. If you asked me on Friday who is the greatest Springbok of all time, I would and ah for a bit, but probably land on Eben Etzebeth.
Yeah.
Right?
I would undoubtedly say Eben Etzebeth.
Yeah. And I think this has been one of these things that's been bizarre. When people are talking about, Dupont is the greatest player I've ever seen in terms of pure ability.
Same in my opinion.
Yeah.
Which can be different from yours, and that's okay.
But it's this thing that lots of African fans, obviously, understandably, a little bit, like, we won the World Cup, why isn't it one of our guys? And the argument that was thrown up is Cheslin Kolbe. And I'm a bit like, no, you have Eben Etzebeth. Like, Eben Etzebeth is the greatest second row of all time. And I say this as, like, Alan Jones on the cover of this book, what I wrote.
Yeah.
He's on there. Like, obviously, outspoken fan of some other second rows, namely Rhys Davis. Tom Johnson. I meant...
He was a 7.
Yeah, he was a 6, really. I meant to say Tom Palmer.
Palmer,
good player.
Anyway,
but Eben Etzebeth, like the greatest second row of all time. I think him and I would have him as the second best player in the world to Dupont.
And I, as much as I also have that opinion, if anybody puts Etzebeth above him, I completely understand that.
Yeah, me too.
Because his skill set, what he brings to a rugby pitch, is so different from what someone like a Dupont, even a Lomu, brings to a rugby pitch. And again, it feels weird bring anybody up in the same sentence as a Jonah Lomu, or even a Gareth Edwards, or any of these people, Johnny Wilkinson, Dan Carter, Martin Nonu, all of these players that people bring up as being like some of the greatest rugby players of all time. None of those really have like skills that are transferable to an Eben Etzebeth, which is why he kind of stands on his own in a way. And there are some people who would say, like, I think he's the greatest player of all time and it's not a competition. And I get it. I get why you would say that.
And and we kind of had this discussion after the game. That in 10 years' time, when we talk about this, when we talk about his career, this gouge will come up.
It will.
In the same way that fans outside of South Africa, when Schalkberger comes up, the first thing a lot of fans in, the Northern Hemisphere, especially in Britain and Ireland, think of about Schalkberger, who was a brilliant player, one of the great Springboks, World Cup winner, like an unbelievable back rower. The gouge in 2009 is like the first thing that comes up, first thing that comes to mind. For me, it is like one of the first like 2 or 3 things that comes to mind when I think of Schalkberger. Yeah. And like as someone in that top percentile of like people who watched him from these kind of shores, right? This will be the same for Etzebeth. Like, it will forever sit in his legacy as he did one of the most thuggish things imaginable. And, like,
the obvious thing to do when you're 73-0 up.
Yeah. It's been the most impressive thing about him is he's such an aggressive player, but he's always sat exactly on the line.
Yes.
Right? And there's been a few times when he's kind of towed over it. This is the first time I think in his career where he's full on, like, jumped over the line and gone beyond it. And it is completely unacceptable.
So he's never had a red card for the Springboks in 140 caps. He's had 1 yellow card
for the way
before.
He plays.
Yeah. For a second row, just any second row. Yeah. Like, but not only that, but like an incredibly hard one. I was thinking about this. I think he's probably the hardest player of the professional era of rugby. And like, other than maybe Buck Shelford, he is one of the hardest players in rugby history. And every single fight that has happened on a Springboks rugby pitch, men's rugby pitch, in the last sort of 12 to 13 years, Eben Etzebeth's been at the heart of it. And he's never done more than push somebody or say something to just rile them up and make them angry, which is great. Like, I think that is a brilliant quality for a second row to have, to be nearly indisciplined. So, because at that point, what you're doing is you're making the opposition make a mistake. You're encouraging them to throw a punch at you or to aggravate the fight. And at that point, you're bringing the referee into the game for the opposition because they're more likely to do something back to you because you know that you're not going to tip over the edge.
So, honestly, there's a little bit of me that does go, Alex Mann was the guy who finally broke him. Like, I've always said Alex Mann is kind of an old school Ponty player, just fell through time and ended up in the modern day.
He's nails.
And and look, Etzebeth sat on that line for so long. Yeah. There's been a lot of discourse around what happened in the lead up to this. So the gouge itself, disgusting, awful. He should get a very long ban for this. Yeah. And it honestly kind of sickens me a little bit that he won't. He won't get a long ban for this. No. Like, we're recording this before the hearing. It probably won't be long after this goes out that we'll hear. He's probably he will be back playing by the end of January.
Yeah, I think he will be.
They will give him probably 12 to 16 weeks, and that'll then be cut down to 6 to 8.
Because his disciplinary record is very good.
A good record, right? Yeah. And that will be it. And because he's a big name, he won't get the treatment for another. Even like David Atube, obviously had France caps, he got 60 weeks banned there.
For a disgraceful gouge that he did.
That should be where we're looking now, right?
Yeah.
We should be looking at a ban of, frankly, like more than a year. And I reckon this is tiptoeing on like getting into refereeing chat. I don't mean to, but like this can't be something that's allowed to see as like passing if you're a big enough name.
But once again, this isn't about rugby. This is because the thing is, if that happens and he only gets 6 weeks ban, that sends out a message to young kids in South Africa who idolise him as one of their greatest ever players, that you can do this on a rugby pitch and the consequences aren't that drastic. And it will send out a message to a lot of young kids worldwide that this game isn't safe to play because there are people who would do this. Also, if you're Eben Etzebeth and you're the hardest man in world rugby at the moment, right? If somebody's riled you up, as Alex Mann clearly has in this case, and we'll talk about that later, right? Just punch him in the face, knock his lights out, do something other than this.
Point at the scoreboard?
Yeah, point at the scoreboard, literally drop your shoulder on him. Yeah. Like, do anything else other than this.
But that's the thing, that's what Etzebeth done his entire career.
Rather than trying to blind him.
Like, Etzebeth has fell just short of this his entire career.
Find him in a breakdown and fucking melt the guy.
Yeah.
Like, you're capable of that. You're one of the hardest, most aggressive, most powerful men in rugby history.
So this comes back to, there's been a lot of chat about what happened in the lead.
Yes, okay.
And so I want to get into this because I do think this is something that's worth covering.
It is.
Because there has been, doing the rounds, 2 doctored images that have been like enhanced by AI and are fake. Are not the case. They were shared by Brian Habana, who obviously, you know, I've met, I've spoken to him a number of times. Really unbelievably lovely guy.
Yeah.
But he's had an absolute howler here. And he shared these fake images that have spread like wildfire and created this kind of narrative that Alex Mann gouged him. If you go back and you look at the tape and you look at it carefully, I've been over like from, you know, as many angles as we can find from the copy of the game. What happens is that they're both at the bottom of a ruck, they're both jostling, they're both, you know, physical hard players. And Etzebeth goes to pin Mann in, Mann goes to push him off him, and as he pushes him, his hand gets to about here, and just about like as he's pulling his face basically onto like upper
as Kieran Azarati's elbow comes in and pushes it to the floor, which doesn't help things.
His hand goes onto the side of his face, and his little finger, like not his thumb, and the AI changed photos have his thumb upside down as
so on his right hand they have a thumb there.
Yeah, and then is forcing its way in backwards to gouge him. That is not what happened. What happened is Alex Mann's little finger kind of hit like the edge here and is on it for at most 2 seconds. I think probably less than that.
Can we agree that Alex Mann should not be putting his hand on somebody's face?
He shouldn't. And when I saw this photo, you know, when I like saw it frozen, I was a bit like, okay, he's got to the eye area.
Yeah.
You know, like that is a gouge, and I think like if it moves, if his hand is like a millimetre further, he's looking at Batman. He should be. But basically, what Mann does is he makes light contact with the eye.
The eye area.
The eye area. Sorry, the eye area with the kind of like outskirt of the eye.
Which is bad enough.
When I saw the image, I thought that was like, okay, that's about to go into his eye. Turns out that is as far as it goes. And you know, I kind of wanted to be like, before watching back, right before doing this a number of times, I wanted to be a bit like, yeah, if Mann cops a ban, that's fair enough. You know, very magnanimous.
Yeah.
But the facts of the matter are, he doesn't really touch his eye. He comes into the area, and Etzebeth then goes, that guy's just come for my eye, so I'm going to go in and assault his. And I was, on first seeing it, like, obviously this is a red card and ban, but do we not know that he's just gone in to grab his face, and he's happened to land his thumb in his eye? No, we've seen, like, that photo, he's gone in for his eye, and Etzebeth's then gone, I want to go for his eye. Like, it's a deliberate thing. And then if you look at it, right, he's squeezing into the eyeball. That's his thumb is pressing itself in.
It's horrible.
That is, yeah, like,
so
if you've seen like Evil Dead movies, right, that is how gouging happens. That's how you go for eyeballs.
I genuinely fear if Rio Dyer isn't in the way here, just grappling with evidence. Rio Dyer, who has no idea what's happening, you know, over his head, by the way, then there is a chance that Eben Etzebeth does something horrific to Alex Mann's eyesight. I don't even dare say it.
No.
As you say, he goes in and then he kind of squeezes his head a little bit.
And that's an Eben Etzebeth thumb. That's not a normal human hand.
Yeah, which the guy is built different.
Yeah.
We've established this many times. The first thing I thought was, if this happened in the first half of the game or something, you have to bring Alex Mann off because luckily there was only a minute and a half left, and I really kind of felt for Alex Man the fact he had to then play on just straight after this and suddenly transport his brain back to this game of rugby that he's playing in. And thankfully, as I say, there's only a minute and a half to go. Obviously, Corbush Reinach kicks the ball out for full time. Alex Mann is spent on the floor. Like, my first thought was just like, I hope the guy's not like traumatised or in shock or anything like that, because that is a horrible thing to have to go through, especially in front of everybody. And the thing is, if not for the fact that the TMO has to watch that in order to determine Eben Etzebeth can't take any further part in this game, you wouldn't be able to broadcast that on television because it is so squeamish and horrible.
I think he's shattered in the game they've just lost by 7 points. Like, you know, but I think that's the core of him falling on the floor. But
definitely.
Like,
I just hope there was nothing worse.
The other thing that happens after the final whistle is Etzebeth goes through and is shaking all these players' hands, having come back on the pitch, having been sent off. You know, as a laugh and joke with his teammates, goes over to the Welsh player, starts shaking hands. Alex Mann shakes his hand, then realises who it is, then turns around, and you can just about make out on the ref mic that he calls Etzebeth a cunt.
Yeah.
And Etzebeth kind of like has a moment of saying nothing and just carries on.
So you can't quite hear everything because Jamie Roberts talking over the top on the English coverage. But what I can make out is he calls him a cunt and then says something like, "You knew what you were doing, you fucking something." You know? Yeah. So Alex Mann, incredibly brave to go up to a man who's just assaulted you, not 5 minutes beforehand, who is literally Eben Etzebeth,
now
and
the
call him a
referee
cunt.
can't do anything about it.
Yeah, so if he goes to fill you in, there's no further consequences really, other than I guess off-field stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it takes incredible bravery. Some would say stupidity, but I kind of respect that in a... Yeah, again, but, I know I say that, but I don't want any of this to have happened.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I can't respect this situation in the slightest, but yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's awful. I think it's incredibly stupid from Etzebeth. I think he has tarnished his own legacy. I think that will sit there on his career for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, maybe not in South Africa, but certainly I think outside it. I think like within Welsh rugby, he'll always be the guy who, you know, like gouged at the end of the game. I think for a lot of like overseas fans, that will now stick with him forever.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not going to say it's a shame that that is going to be the case. It's a shame that he did that.
Yes.
Because this is one of the all-time greats, and I've loved watching him for so long.
Yeah.
And I've loved that he has sat on the line, right?
You never want to say this about an all-time great.
No.
You want to just be full of praise so we can sit here and, you know, when we do our bloody Mount Rushmore videos or whatever and just talk about how brilliant the guy is.
And much as you can say, like, it's not who he is, he only did it once, like, I don't mean to compare it to murder, that's not what I'm doing, but like, most murderers only kill one person once, you know, but they have that in them, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, just because he crossed that line once doesn't mean it's not who he, like, you know.
Yeah. And again, part of what's made him such a good player is the fact that he's never crossed this line before.
Yeah.
And that
it's a shame. It's a shame.
We would have talked about. And like, I don't know, as I say, like, talking about what he did in the context of a rugby game just feels wrong to me.
Yeah.
Because it's an appalling thing to witness, you know, just as a human being.
Really weird test match to end the year.
Yeah.
It felt almost impossible to break down and analyse properly. It felt like all we could do was either ignore it or try and do this and just talk about it.
Congratulations to the other 22 Springboks. Like, fair play to them. They were absolutely brilliant. And like all year, the Springboks have been utterly dominant, have 13 wins from 15 this year. That is an incredible record. And yeah, like best luck to them moving forward.
Have used more than 50 players.
Yeah.
And have really built. So yeah, excited to perhaps look at their year in more depth down the line.
Yeah.
Now that that's done, now that we're not doing that detail, we have moved on to Moment of the Year already. We've already made a start on that. So that is well on its way. We've got the World Cup draw coming up. We've got other stuff coming up. But yeah, just a really weird game. Really weird game to
emotionally heavy. And as I say, going back to talk about the funny kids game after this will be a bit of whiplash. But yeah, that's our job.